We are live. We are live in what is YEV, and it's just me and Alex today. YEV, Alex.
Why not? I haven't even got to do
Why
it in tandem with Kev this week.
not? Yeah, Kev's away today. He was off yesterday, last week actually. But let's get straight into it before I start rambling, because that's what people like, not me rambling. So today we're going to be talking about, will electric cars become classic cars? And Alex, where did this all stem from?
Well, for me, I mean, I get a weird mix of stuff on social media. So I get both ends of the. It's a broad spectrum, right? You know, but it's perceived to be quite tribal. So I get, on the one hand, because I socialize with a lot of the guys who are into kind of classic combustion engine stuff. I get a lot of kind of very pro ICE, anti EV stuff, but I also, at the other end of the spectrum, get a lot of kind of very pro EV stuff as well. Last few weeks, I've seen something coming up quite a lot, and it's a picture of it's quite a modified, hot rodded 19, I think it's a 69 or 70 Charger with a Model 3 next to it, and it says, "Sorry, but in 50 years, nobody is going to be restoring a Tesla." And this came up 2 or 3 times in my feed, and I just thought, no, see, I just don't agree with that. So I put up a post on LinkedIn, and it was a flippant thing, right? I mean, I was in the middle of sorting other stuff up around the house, like just doing kind of a load of washing, just sat there with a cup of coffee and just went, no, don't agree with this. This is nonsense. And it went berserk. I'm up to about 200,000 views on it. It's had somewhere in the region of
30,000. Wow.
Yeah. 1,300 odd likes, 600 interactions. Half of them haven't read the bit below the text, so they've just seen the bit where I've posted the picture of the 2 cars. A lot of really interesting discussions on there, and a lot of kind of exactly the sort of thing that you might expect would come out of those, but actually some really quite engaging things as well. So yeah, it seems to be a topic that really polarizes people, and I don't get it. And I think it's partially because of that tribalism. I think I'm hearing from both ends of the spectrum a lot, because the people who are on those both ends of the spectrum quite often are the ones who've got the loudest points that they want to make. But it's been interesting as well, seeing what falls into the middle ground, and people who kind of go, well, actually, it's not for me, but yeah, I do get that. So yeah, it's a.
Well, do you guys read chat? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We do read the chat, so send us in what you guys think around what we're talking about. Yeah, please interject where you need to. So yeah, I hadn't really thought about an electric car being a classic car, because obviously I'm converting a classic car to electric. So I'd never really thought about, an electric car being a classic car until you mentioned it on our WhatsApp, really. So yeah, I mean, and I think we had a brief chat a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, explain your thoughts on it, because I mean, as you mentioned just a minute ago, what is a classic car?
It's the thing that I've found in the time that I've been driving is it's actually a transient thing. It's not a static, fixed in time moment. And a lot of the people who responded to my thread responded as if it was. Now, what's interesting about it is there's a lot of different things that can make a classic car, but those definitions vary depending on who you talk to. And I've actually encountered this myself. So I'm not drink, kind of talking about the Polar, I found that I've gone from being a young lad in a newish modified car, to being somebody who gets talked about as somebody who's, I'm a grey-haired, middle-aged guy in a modern classic, so to speak. And I've seen this myself. And also what I've started to notice now is if you look at shows like Festival of the Unexceptional, for example, and Radwood to some extent as well, although, and even if you look at like Volkswagen shows, I mean, how many Beetles did Volkswagen make? Millions and millions and millions of these cars. Those were not cars for enthusiasts. Those were white goods. They were a way to get around, right? They were characterful, but they were white. They were appliance cars. Millions of those cars got left to rot, got beaten the hell out of, abused, scrapped, were forgotten about. But because they have a place in people's hearts, because people grew up with them, because people remember them, because people would do stuff to them, because they were interesting in ways, and they're different to ways that, different to other vehicles that were around, there's a fondness to them. And so from my perspective, I think it's interesting reading people who are kind of going, well, these EVs, they're white goods, they're appliances. Nobody's going to care about them. It's not like you restore your toaster or your. I do know somebody who does restore toasters, so that's not a good example. Or your vacuum cleaner or your washing machine, and it's just not true. It's not like that at all. So for me, I think there's going to be a whole generation, isn't there, of kids who grew up remembering their parents' first Tesla and how different it would have felt to, I don't know, I'm not going to pick on a specific car, but whatever they would have had before, and how different it, the whoopee cushions and the displays on it and all the things that you remember as a kid, and the fact also that
clarify, people probably don't know what you mean by whoopee cushions. For some people that haven't been in a Tesla, but yeah, you can make the indicators make the noise of fart noises essentially from different places. But in Togino, I hope I've pronounced that right. I own a 22 plate or 22 year Taycan 4S in frozen blue, and it's a very beautiful car. What do you think of that being a classic in the future?
I absolutely think. I mean, it's got the advantage of the Porsche badge, right? So I mean, it's a step in the right direction on that front. I mean, I think it's going to be as broad, isn't it? As the sorry.
I was going to say right now it depreciates as much as a Macan. I'm not sure how much Macans depreciate. I know in the media and everyone's saying about, oh, Porsches have depreciated loads and loads and loads. But you take a Porsche Panamera, it's Panamera, isn't it? They depreciate like an absolute, like a lead balloon as well. So I think it's just people picking on electric cars again. I mean, from my point of view, yeah, my Tesla took a massive hit the first couple of years after the bubble and all the rest of it burst, after the electric prices went up. However, I swear to God, it's stayed the same price. It's about the same value the last 8-10 months. It really hasn't moved. But yeah, sorry, you were saying about white goods. Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna start a new Instagram reference to white goods when I can jump on there soon.
There's a brilliant thread, and the original website is gone. The original article link is gone, but it's quite easy to look up. Talking about classic car owners, but talking about it in an abstract way. So they're actually talking about this guy goes to visit a guy who collects vintage washing machines. And he talks about the satisfaction of how the manual aspects of it. And this one, you've got to kind of crank it by hand. And this one makes a bit more noise and makes a few more smells than the other one. But, I love it anyway because it's a classic of its year. And you read it and you kind of go, oh, God, I feel seen here, But it's one of those things. It's kind of, everyone's got a different take on what a classic car is, right? And there were some very interesting kind of comments where people kind of came in and they said things like, well, I mean, the argument was fundamentally flawed in this case because it was comparing a Dodge Charger, which was an interesting car when it was new, right? Yeah. With a Model 3, which is a good car, a competent car, but an ordinary car. Like, it's a mass market car, right? It's not...
It's a Ford Mondeo of the EV world, isn't it?
Exactly that, yeah. And... So actually, if you take those two cars and you flip it around and you imagine comparing, say, a Tesla Roadster with a 3 Series or a Mondeo of its era, instantly you undermine that argument, right? Because which one of those is more likely to be saved? It's going to be the Roadster, isn't it? And that's the closest thing we're kind of getting to those kind of early, very obvious classic cars. I think things like the i3 are going to come down that line as well. The kind of the game changers, the mold breakers of the early EV era. Where, yeah, I mean, I guess these were less so perhaps with the i3, but they were, some of these were launched as ordinary cars. The Leafs and the iMeves and the really early stuff, quirky and interesting at the time, and will seem antiquated in the same way that modern classics do now, where you look back at them and you kind of go, yeah.
I think the argument would be from a lot of petrol heads or people that aren't into EVs or don't know really the ins and outs of what you can do with EVs in terms of refurbishment of batteries would be, well, it's just going to be a throwaway item. They're going to treat it like a phone. You don't use your 3210 or your clamshell phone anymore because the battery life's crap and the technology's not up to date. But but I mean, there's lots of examples out there where you can replace batteries, and you mentioned the i3 there. There is a complete battery pack you can get from China now to replace the BMW i3. You can change the battery packs on Nissan Leafs. There's lots of things, and we are only really at the beginning of EVs and what you can do with them from a refurbishment point of view. So I think I think the argument there is probably, dare I say, a bit uneducated, because they don't know what's out there to be able to keep these vehicles running. Plus the fact that ultimately we don't know yet, because we don't have crystal balls. So to say that, oh no, it's going to be thrown away, it's going to be broken to bits. Well, yeah, like any car really, but there will be some that people cherish and they keep going, and vehicles that probably only do very small miles, or some people that upgrade the batteries. But what I was going to go on to say is, you mentioned about the festival of, what was it, the festival of unexceptional.
Yeah.
Or as to quote a comment which I like, that Johnny Smith says, rare but nobody cares. I would never think that Austin Maestro was going to become a car to be a classic, or just some off-key car that no one used to buy. I'm just trying to think of I don't know, a Toyota Yaris Verso, I don't know, something like that, which is kind of a really quirky car. But so Mod Scotsman, when I used to work for Vauxhall many moons ago, I was told a car is meant to last 7 years. Well, it's a Vauxhall after all. OEMs love finance deals, as it keeps the flow of new vehicles going. That's a good point, actually. Yeah, the pressure from there's no point spending X amount of money on a used car when you can buy another one for X amount per month. And we'll talk about that later, with all the strong deals coming through for EV lease deals. Lost Welshman, EVs might need to become more interesting. I say that as an owner of one. Less SUVs, and perhaps cars like the Renault 5 and turbo versions will capture some modding as well, with body kits, etc. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, you mentioned SUV there. I drove the new, what was it, the Cadillac SUV. And to be fair, there's so many SUVs on the market, but that's what sells. And as I intimated, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, that the reason why that probably is the case is because it's more of a kind of a female-led decision these days a lot of the time, with testosterone diminishing out there. So I think that's the reason why SUVs are so popular these days, because it does tend to be a joint decision, and happy life.
But that's of an era, isn't it? If you think about vehicles being very of the moment, there'll come a point where things will become less SUV shaped. It's going to fall out of fashion at some point, much like MPVs have, right? And I think what you'll then find is that a lot of these SUVs symbolize this period in time. They'll look like 2010s, 2020s cars. That'll be a form factor that we're used to at the moment. And then once you do start to find people, because the efficiency thing is going to start pushing people into more aerodynamic vehicles, isn't it? I mean, they're going to find. We're already starting to see estate cars and things like the ID7 and even the Model 3. I mean, the Model 3 obviously is not an SUV. The more aerodynamic stuff is starting to filter through. You've got things like the BYD Seal. I think there will come a point where you'll look back at the SUV phase, and it's kind of been a necessity, hasn't it, of the packaging issues you get sometimes with batteries to put them into SUVs.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's going to come a phase where people look back on them, and there'll be a nostalgia attached to that as a, oh my god, do you remember we did those? Like an almost kind of an ironic look back on it. So.
PWN E-Motors, who is doing EV conversion on, I want to say a Mustang. Sorry if that was wrong. He's put my Corvair. I love a Corvair. And it's only, I didn't really know about Corvairs until I realized that they were rear engined and great for EV conversion. That's what got me interested in them, to be fair. But what is an Corvair ramp side? That's the estate, isn't it? I think could be.
I'm not sure.
Please let me know. We'll never bring the big bucks like the GT500 Mustang or the early Charger. I think it's just more of a taste thing, though, isn't it? I mean, you have those icon cars, but I think true car enthusiasts do tend to like something a little bit quirky, sometimes a little bit different. You know, we've got Alex on my right here, who's got a Polo G40, which you don't see very often. They're not worth very much money, but as far as I'm concerned, as a car guy, super cool, you know. But yeah, I think it's just one of those. Lost Welshman, you're certainly right about SUVs. Boring Tesla interiors too. The best ones may become classics though. Yeah, too true. PWN E-Motors is getting the messages in. The ramp side is a pickup truck with a ramp on the right size. Totally useless in the UK.
Thing is,
Although
I mean,
we do with a pickup truck, the amount of holes we've got in the roads, mate.
I don't see that you'll have people queuing up at Barrett Jackson to spend 7 figures on a Model 3, or kind of doing that sort of restoration work on it. I just think it's going to be that there will be a core of people who've got an affection for them, a bit like the Beetles, a bit like the early Golfs. Your ordinary cars. You look at like Mark 1 Escort prices. I mean, Christ, the Mark 1 Escort was one of, if not the best-selling car on the roads. You try and find a cheap Mark 1 Escort now, they're really hard things to find. And I think that there's a game changer aspect, I think, with some of the early EVs, where I mean, and also the fact that because of the fact that they're quite they're mainstream, they'll get used, they'll get abused, they'll get knocked about. A lot of them will disappear, and then so we're coming back, I guess, to this idea of what is a classic car. Part of it is nostalgia, which is what I mentioned earlier. Part of it is that kind of, you go through a phase where they're disposable, a lot of them leave the roads, and that then starts to make them less ubiquitous, and something where people go, I remember those, or I've seen photos of those, but I've never seen one in the metal. Oh my God, when was the last time you saw a Model 3? 5 minutes ago today. But like, you know, in 20 years' time, they'll have the nostalgia factor for a generation of people who probably don't even have driving licenses yet in some cases. They'll start to be less ubiquitous on the road. And so they will start to symbolize an era, and they'll be less common, and also hard to find perhaps in a really good restorable spec, or you take on the challenge of buying a rough one and build it up from there. So it's kind of layering those aspects on, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying there is giving me echoes of the drift scene absolutely hammering every single rear-wheel drive manual car.
Right.
Where you look at BMW E36s, Volvo 340s, you look at 200SXs, and all these cars where so many have been absolutely smashed. And I've had all of those cars, ironically, and I didn't smash any of them. I hesitate. Sold them too cheap, and now they're just bonkers money. But what I like to think about the Tesla Model 3, you could be right about them being used and abused, but I do think that there will be a really strong, because there's so many on the road, a really strong aftermarket to keep them going, whether it's batteries and motors and things like that. But then what also is kind of going through my head is the fact that with the ultimate reduction in, certainly the government and maybe a globalization point of view, they're trying to take us out of our cars and getting us more into whether it's public transport or maybe we're in this time in the next maybe decade where it will be the start to be the slowdown of cars and privately owned cars. I don't know. I haven't got any preference either way. I have, because I'm a massive car nut, obviously. That will be an interesting thing to see what if that does affect the future of not only the car market but classic cars, but an electric car as a classic car. What's your thoughts on that, Alex? Do you think that's possible? I mean, I know we did 15-minute cities a couple of weeks ago, which I think people believe that will be the case. They'll take us out of our cars, but we'll see. I don't know. What do you reckon?
I think we've reached peak car. I don't think that we're going to carry on growing and growing and growing. And I think there will be a move towards more shared multimodal stuff, but I think that's going to take time. And in some ways, that again feeds back into that kind of obsolescent, days gone by kind of sense with private transport in general, and with those cars kind of starting to slot into. Because actually, one of the things that Tesla's, picking on Tesla, but it's kind of has done very well is making a car feel very normal, making it just fit into that kind of wider, just a car, and from that point of view, it will start to blend into the other stuff that we've got around today. People just view it as part.
People would argue that. I think a lot of people would argue that a Tesla is not just a car, and the reason for that, not just because it's electric, but because inside it's nothing like any other car, because it's so bland, so boring. So I think a lot of people would argue that.
But in terms of it being an EV, I think people will start to just view it as a clump of cars in the same way that older vehicles have become a clump of kind of classic cars. It will be part of an era of motoring that was different to perhaps the one that we get in 20, 30, 40 years' time.
Yeah, and I think, speculating slightly, but talking about full self-driving. I think full self-driving once, I don't think it's a if, I think it's a once. Once that is cracked, I think that will really affect what happens, not only to number of cars on the road, but where cars become. And I know that we've talked about it on this channel a couple of times, and even me and my petrolhead mates, but even before I'd started Chargeheads, this is a long time ago, we were thinking, well, cars are going to become like horses. You go, it's somewhere on a racetrack, you get to enjoy them, but they're not going to be on public roads so much, because it'll all be just a completely different space. And I still think that is quite relevant. I think that is going to be the way that things are going to go. And are there going to be car shows still with, are we going to be able to drive them on the road? It'd be really interesting. I'd love to look into the future and see in 20 years' time what transport looks like. It would be amazing. Well, as long as World War II hasn't killed us off.
The interesting thing as well that came up a lot with the discussions on LinkedIn is about durability. And it's interesting how people have a sense that we touched on this a little bit earlier with this kind of the disposability angle. I think disposability has been engineered into cars for decades. Obsolescence and the ability to just degrade and to rust away and so on. And I actually think that there's a potential with a lot of stuff on an EV that it won't necessarily do that. Actually, in terms of vehicles in general, regardless of powertrain, we've got much better at rust proofing them and using different grades of steel and so on to kind of avoid some of the issues that older cars even 20, 30 years ago had with degrading over time. And now you put a motor in them, and motors, starting to hear people talking about million-mile powertrains that you'll need on these autonomous vehicles, where you're going to need, in order to have those vehicles on the road all the time, you're going to need some form of something that's really, really, really durable within those. The weak point that came up a lot is always perceived to be batteries, isn't it? That's the one that kind of comes up, and that's a bit of an unknown.
Well, I'm still got just waiting for the referral code. It would have been out this week, but should be hopefully out next week. Got referral code for battery tests and battery warranty for EVs, so keep an eye out for that, everybody. But it'd be the battery does seem to be the weaker point, but as technology moves on, like with the Tesla and more popular models, I think it will be a replacement battery. It's going to be very interesting, but I think ultimately what we're saying is that EVs will be classic cars. I mean, I look at a Mitsubishi Maev and think that's pretty cool. It'd be quite cool just to have that as a runabout. I tell you what, then, Alex, if you had to buy a 10-year plus electric car to have as an enjoyable car, what would it be? And what do you think now is out that you could buy brand new or used that will be a really good future classic, and you can't mention Tesla Roadster?
So from 10 years ago, I would say it's probably, I'm going to be boring and say probably the i3, because I just think that was such an interesting piece of engineering in itself. I mean, I don't think
2014. It's about right, actually, isn't it? So
I drove it end of 2013, so I drove it just after I drove it end of 2013. So it was it's just about within the scope. So
okay, and what newer one would you go for?
Oh, see, now here's the interesting thing is I wonder if something like the MG Cyberster might be quite an interesting one to hang on to, because that's quite groundbreaking in its in its approach to stuff, isn't it? And it's quite an interesting car.
Yeah.
Or even
yeah.
you could even extend that out to this stuff like MG4 X Power. I mean, that's democratizing power in ways that even going back 20, 25 years, the Japanese, the Subarus and Mitsubishis of the world were doing. But
yeah, that's a good point, actually. I'll do mine in a second after these comments. So, Lost Welshman, yes, classics don't always have to be expensive, but capture something. I was lasted after a Ford Capri, not EV version. Oh dear, the amount of comments I've had on the electric Capri I've done recently. My mum has a nice Miner she bought from new. There we go. We'll talk to George Kinghorn. I'm sure he'll want to convert it for her if she's up for it. Mod Scotsman, the bodywork side isn't the problem. It's the software and upgrade parts of modern cars that will be difficult part to maintain in the future. Look at Fiskars recently. Yeah. I mean, you've got a good point there, but I think on a electric car that's fully established, like a Nissan Leaf, I think wasn't there that technology that fell down recently, or they've turned it off, but there's already gadgets that can keep. It's the app, wasn't it? I think it was the app on the Renault Zoe or the Nissan Leaf, wasn't it?
It's the mobile network that they've taken down. It's either, I think it's the 2G network where it doesn't work anymore. But I'll come back after you say about the current comment on the screen. But I've got some thoughts on the software side of things as well.
Yeah. Well, no, we'll keep going, and we'll read that out in a second because it's a slightly different kettle of fish. But yeah, I think from the software point of view, I don't think that's an issue with the more mainstream cars, but something like the Fisker, because it was only out for less than a year, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't even working in the first place. Let's be honest. I mean, every time I speak to someone who's just bought a Fisker, they've got an issue with it charging or something like that. I'm sure there's working ones out there, but yeah, I think, it's an interesting one, but I don't think you're going to have that issue with the likes of your Teslas, your Nissan Leafs, and things like that, because they can be, the software can be broken and they can be updated, or piggyback software can go on them to utilize them in the way that they could be used before, and probably upgrades as well. But yeah, Mod Scotsman's put, what about the RBW EVMG as a new car instant classic? And for people who don't know what an RBW is, it's basically an old school MG that has been electrically not converted. It's electric from the first off. I don't know, what do they actually call those? I don't think anyone's come up with a name for them. Like just an electric classic, I suppose.
Like an e-resto mod, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I suppose so. You could argue that's an instant classic, but we were kind of focusing on the OEM electric cars because, I would say that the TVR would be an instant classic, but it's nowhere close to instant, that's for sure. More like a very slow roast. Right, what's he got? Fox on Follies, good evening. I think the MG4 is a modern version of the XR3i, a hot version of the ultra basic car. Yeah, it's a good shout. Go on in, Alex. What were you going to say about the software piece?
You've stolen my thunder a little bit with what you were saying. I mean, I think it was interesting. It came up a lot on the thread on LinkedIn, and there's two sides to it. Firstly, that, I mean, from my personal experience, it's interesting talking to people building these now, because if they start from scratch, there's an ECU in it. When I did the engine work on this back in 20 years ago, people were still plugging into the diagnostic port and developing a map and then putting it on a chip that they'd put in the car. Yep. Nowadays, people just bin all that off, start from scratch, aftermarket ECU, and redo the wiring and other bits and pieces, and run it off that. That specialism's gone, but there's alternatives. There's no support for the original hardware, so people come up with alternatives, as you were saying. But the other aspect with that is, it was interesting reading how many people kind of going, nobody's going to be able to make a Tesla run. And I was thinking, people are already taking Tesla parts and putting them in classic 911s and TVRs. If you can make all of that stuff work in a 50, 60-year-old car, why can't it work in the original? And everything else is just screens and software, isn't it? I mean, if you can, maybe some of the connected services won't work, but I'm sure if you can probably emulate the look and feel of the original software, someone's going to find a way of doing it. It's just a case of, at the moment, there's no market for it because those cars still work out as they were intended to. There's no need for anyone to be tinkering with them.
Yeah.
Actually, you might know more about, well, so you probably know more about this, battery structures and so on. I mean, how replaceable are the batteries in a not that I'm kind of suggesting that the EV batteries are anything particularly to be worried about, but if you have a Model 3 or a Model Y, I mean, how structural are the structural batteries in those? Because I know they're set in like a resin type thing, aren't they, the cells in those?
They are, yeah. So something like Model S from Model Y, they're modules, so they're much easier to replace or to repair. Thing is, with the Model 3 and the Model Y so far, from all the research that I've done, any that have had issues with the batteries have just been replaced under Tesla warranty because it's been within the 120,000 miles or 8 years manufacturer's warranty. Everything over and above that, there's just not any examples out there yet because the batteries have been so reliable. Where's touch the wood? There it is.
Yeah, don't get into that.
But they're in the Model 3 and Model Y, they're longer modules. I think it's 4 of them from memory. But I don't think they're as structural as some of the newer ones coming out. So yeah, I mean, I think I'd come across some people talking about the MG5 the other day, the estate version of the MG electric. And you can actually, I think it was Cleveland EV were mentioning it, that you can actually take out the smaller battery, 51 kilowatt hour, and put in a 61 kilowatt hour, and you don't actually need to change anything. You just plug it in and it works. So this is what's exciting for me, and this is why I'm really happy to, with Chargeheads, and I want to explore this even more with everybody else. The fact that the possibilities, there are so many at the moment. So and having some really clever people out there, the engineers and the software people, which isn't me, and I like highlighting these sort of people just to show what can be done, because I think we've only just scratched the surface so far, which is exciting. The fact that I don't think it's going to be any different to you got to take the analogy of a remote control car, haven't you? You look at the Tamiya remote control cars, you can do pretty much anything to them. Okay, we'll change the body. Okay, we'll change the motors, upgrade the motors. We'll change the battery, upgrade the batteries. It's exactly the same sort of principle, isn't it? I mean, yes, okay, there's going to be some difficulties in putting certain motors in and batteries to make sure it adheres to the law and make sure it's structurally sound and all the rest of it. In UK, not America, they've just cut the effer up. But yeah, I mean, I'm very excited with what is the potential there. Marlin May, my opinion, the people to ask about future classics are the digital natives. Those folks will have the technical wherewithal to keep. I probably said that wrong. To keep today's EVs functional into the 2050s, including their software. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Marlin, for that one. Yeah, it's. Go on, sorry, mate.
No, I say I agree entirely. We didn't cover earlier. How about you? What would you buy if you were looking at getting that 2-car garage?
The 2-car garage of the classics. I think it would. I do like a Mitsubishi YEV and YEV. Because I did. There was one round near me before, and someone put some wheels on it, and I thought it looked cool. And I just I do love my Jap cars, and yeah, I just thought one of those would be quite cool, just as a bit of a runabout. But as a classic car to buy now, that's a good one. This is not prepared whatsoever, and I don't want to just choose a random one, which will probably happen. It's got to be a Honda, isn't it? Another small little.
That is a good shout. Yeah, I love the
maybe
Honda.
The 10-year. Yeah, they've got my two little runabouts. I could do with, to be honest, I could do with a long range car. Really, I think it'd have to be a Model S or a Model X. To be fair,
Model S is
I just know
that's easy. That's another easy choice for classic. The Model S changed the game, didn't it? I mean, Model S kind of paved the way for a lot of what's come in the meantime. And I actually think it's going to be interesting to see what you can do with these vehicles once you do get them into the hands of enthusiasts, when they do start to reach. And there is obviously a scene already, isn't there? But it's a small one. It's a relatively new one. I mean, back 30 years ago, there probably weren't as many people people playing with kind of chip tuning and electronic fuel injection. It's very short. It seemed very short-sighted to me to think that things would stay as they are now. That perceptions of today's cars would be fixed in time. Today's aftermarket would be fixed in time. It's a very short-sighted view. It's never been that.
No. E-up was a cute thing, and the short run will increase its value. Yeah, I mean, that was a good car. What was I seeing on the other day? Someone mentioned it on one of the WhatsApp saying, I think it was this electric car. It was a small electric car, 16 grand. It's about 160-mile range. Some weird looking thing. Looked like yeah, I'll find it. Do you know the one I mean?
Leap
Coming to
motor.
the UK.
The
The
leap
what?
motor. Leap motor.
Yeah.
The
Hideous thing. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to be, because obviously everything's cheaper, but it'd be nice if we get some cheaper electric cars. But, they've got to look the part, because otherwise people won't want to be seen dead in them, will they? So, but yeah, I mean, talking about EV classics, I think, you mentioned the Tesla Roadster. I mean, that's an obvious classic, Are there any others out there that are rare? I think the Honda E is a pretty good shout. Because how they are still making those new, but I don't think they're going to sell them for very many more years. And they're not exactly selling in volume, are they?
I had a feeling gone with the E9 one. I think the stuff now is all stock. I don't think they're making it, because they were talking about making a road version of that, weren't they, a while back with the same platform? There was a concept version which was kind of an homage to the S600.
Yeah.
Very cute little car, and
like
nothing kind of really came of it. Sorry. Yeah, Honda Beat. Yeah.
I think, was it Rich Rebuilds? He did a Honda Beat with some electric bike motor. He does some weird stuff. See that hybrid caddy that he did?
No, I've not seen that.
I wouldn't bother. It was an electric motor in the front, and they put a rear-mounted Hayabusa turbo engine in the back. It was a caddy, but it was just, honestly, the amount of time, money, and effort they put into it. It was. You look at it, you're like, why? Anyway, batteries continue to improve at an amazing rate. Absolutely. Imagine a Honda E, beautiful car with an upgraded battery and therefore twice the range. Exactly. And I don't think it's really going to be happening on the Honda E's unless there's some specialist company out there. But I think Tesla Model 3s, the MG5s, more volume cars where there's going to be the business, is going to be the potential revenue maker out of it. You know what I mean? I can't remember the specific word. I've a couple of wines. Ugly can work. Look at the 2CV.
Ugly can be characterful. Ugly can be very characterful. So yeah, I think that's another. Interesting you're saying about the Honda E. There's already a few quite heavily modified ones in the UK. Really quite bold, very, very heavily carbon fiber clad, heavily body kitted, quite a cool kind of little build. So,
well, funnily enough, when that first was shown at Petrol Hedonism, I had a Chargehead stand at Petrol Hedonism, and I did a video. And if anyone's not watched it, please go back and watch it. It's one of my favorite videos, probably because I had so much fun. And that particular Honda is there. It had ceramics on it. It had full body kit on it. It was an amazing car. There's some pretty cool electric cars there. Go back and watch it. It was called Petrol. What did I call it? EV Hedonism, I think I called it. It was about 2 years ago. The camera works really good because I wasn't doing it. Please excuse the dodgy hair. But yeah, go back and watch it. I really enjoyed that video, and it's got that Honda in it. I love the Honda Beats and the conversion that Rich done. I wish Honda would do a K car for EV sports car. Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if they could make it cheap enough, and this I think this would be a classic. You could get like a 2-seater electric car with, I don't know, 200 kilowatt motor, which will give it 150 brake horsepower in old money, with decent torque, light, 2-seater, small battery, I don't know, 30 kilowatt hour, put it in the back, So give it that kind of mid-engined kind of feel to it. I think that
We
would
were
be
saying
pretty
this the other
cool.
week, weren't we, about having where's the electric MX5? That's the kind of the demo of, because as a showcase for EV tech and where it's going, the ability to do a small, lightweight, lowish power, really driver focused EV. I think just carving its little niche out and just kind of showing that there's all the tech that you can then drip feed into city cars and hot hatches and other kind of just push it out, because at the moment the performance EV stuff is very heavy on the performance, isn't it? I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of horsepower, which is fine. It's great. There's definitely a market for that. We covered this in one of the early episodes, didn't we? Talking about
I mean, I think I know there's a focus of putting the batteries in the floor, to get that even weight distribution. But what's wrong with having a nice big pendulum weight in the back?
Have you seen the Lotus stuff? So Lotus have got a modular setup for an EV platform, but I mean it's basically a rear structure for an electric sports car. It was a government-funded project a few years ago. Really, really interesting and worth looking up if you look into it. But they can do multiple different things with that setup. So they can either have a 2+2 setup with the battery under the floor and a motor at the back, or they can have a 2-seater setup more like an Elise, and they can have a chest battery behind. So a chest-shaped battery. So you sit on the floor, but then you have a chest-shaped battery, which gives you a similar weight distribution and handling characteristics to I think they said it was similar to a V6 engine in terms of the way that they were laying it out. So a bit like you've got in the with Lotus names. What is it called? It's really annoying me. Sorry. So their last petrol car, so the one that they launched a couple of years ago, that the name is really annoying me that I can't remember.
The Evora.
Not the Evora. It's
the one after that.
Yeah, I keep saying Evia, and it's not Evia. It's or Electra UV. It begins. Yeah. Anyway, they've got and it's either a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder engine in it, and they're basically saying that you can kind of replicate those handling characteristics in a sports car by having a chest-shaped battery behind the seats.
This is why when I see an EV conversion like Russ's that I went to go and see recently, which was the Lotus with the batteries in the back, that was amazing to drive, and yeah, I think that's great. And also the Me On E, which was the beach buggy with the batteries down the middle, that was amazing. But cost has always come into it. That's a new car, small battery pack. It's still quite expensive. Amazing car to drive, but this is why I was, instead of doing the TVR, I was thinking about doing an MR2, because I thought, where the space is with the engine, and the luggage space is no good because it's too far back behind the wheels. But I think there's definitely room for a new electric car of that kind of, something that's a bit price rangey and all the rest of it. Well, we live and hope. There's a sweet electric Kai car made by Nissan in Japan. Haven't seen any over here yet. Which one? Which one? Which Nissan? I love a bit of Jap stuff. We can talk about JBL stuff all day long. There's loads of what Nissan. We're not talking about the Figaro, obviously. What Nissan Qashqai you talking about, Foxanne? 2011, 2012 Fisker Karma. It worked, but beautiful and low volume. Fev though, values mid 20-30k right now. Well, there is the opportunity, which I know that, funnily enough, yourself, Alex, is into, which is, this is a good subject maybe to talk to, is from a classic point of view, is if you could buy a Fev and make it fully electric. Now, Alex told me a while back, and I know that there's a couple of people that are actually making them, is Honda Insights and making them fully electric. And ironically, there was one for sale, wasn't there, Alex? And I sent you the link. I don't know what it went for. Did it go on eBay in the end?
I can't remember what the link was on.
It was a pretty decent car.
DC charging, but then anything like that, you can kind of, I mean, it's all semi-modular, isn't it? Yeah, once you hack into the software, as long as you've got enough cooling for it, you can add things like DC charging later on. But
there we go. So before I get into more of the comments, and thanks everyone for taking part. Don't forget to give us a like and a share and all the rest of it. Is if you could choose a Fev to electrify, what would it be?
i8.
Oh, that's good choice. That is a good choice.
Dual motor i8 with modern battery tech would be one hell of a car.
Everyone who's watching, please let me know what FEV you think you would want to electrify. Get out the ICE motor. Let me think. I'm going to think about that one because my brain's not as quick as yours, Alex. Especially after 2 glasses of red wine. Have a look at Callum EV car. Also, Aero just built an E-Nomad too. Callum EV car. Why do I know? Oh, the Callum. Yes, I have seen that a few times. I don't know much about it though. And GBS have done electric Super 7. Yeah. Well, Eco Classics have done like the Westfield and the Chesil Speedster, and a few people have done the 356 Porsche shape. That's a cool car to do. Although Eco Classics, it was more of a conversion. No, it wasn't a conversion. It wasn't battery on the floor, which is what the what's the name of the company? Sebring have got a purpose-built skateboard platform that was made by Zero EV, now Felton. I've not driven it still, but that was BMW suspension. It had a Tesla Model 3 motor, DC charging. Now that is exciting because if you pick one of those up, it's a Porsche 356 shape. It's got all new technology, and you could probably boost that up. That would be mint, I reckon. I mean,
what else would be interesting? XL1.
I'm a massive unfan of XL1, but if they chuck that diesel motor out, diesel engine out, I'm with you. Definitely, yeah. XL1.
And if you're feeling really brave, you could turn it into the XL Sport, but do an electric XL Sport. The XL Sport was a great looking car. What
does the XL Sport look like? I'm really interested to know what.
Oh, the XL Sport is it was killed because of Dieselgate, but it's basically, if you try and imagine the XL1 but as a 2-seat sports car. And then Porsche have got a concept that was based on it as well, which came out
recently. That's bloody lovely.
Isn't it?
Bloody lovely. That's an R8, mate.
Look,
R8. Okay, Nissan Sakura. All right, I'm looking at cars. I shouldn't be doing this, guys. But Nissan Sakura. I've got a thing about doing Japanese impressions at the moment. After my nephew came around and started doing 1 to 13 in Japanese because he's just started karate. Well, I'm not sure about that. It looks like a Nissan Aria that's been squished and been in the vice. Oh, sorry. Hang on, just sort my camera out. The Lexus S. Oh, it's a good shout. So I'm just going to come out and bear with.
I can see the next comment is quite an interesting one too, and a good shout. So I'm going to jump back in and say, Marlin, I haven't got the ability to bring your comment up yet, but an electric CRZ would be awesome. That was one of those cars where I was desperate to love it as a big CRX fan, and it's got the most amazing. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. It's got the
CRX.
most amazing.
There's so many. We have to make a list, aren't we? We have to make a list of FEVs that we need to start buying up when the batteries are dead. Talking of batteries are dead, you know your mate on YouTube. What's his name?
Oh, don't. I'm not even going to get into that. But yeah, go on.
I won't mention his name, but you're saying, oh, BMW hybrids are worth nothing because they need new batteries. It's more clickbaity that he's jumping on at the moment. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, fully electric CRZ. That would be super sweet. That would be really sweet. Upgrade the motor. I mean, to be fair, you can't, I know a lot of people are putting K20s in them. They're quite a lot of money still, though, aren't they?
Yeah, they're really pretty decent money. Interestingly, I did I did a work trip, and on the way there, I had an CRV. So the Honda's was a big 4.7 meter long, big SUV. And on the way up to the office, I stopped off at a guy's house in Oxfordshire to pick up some seats for this. So the front seats that are in this, bundled them into the back of it. Got to the office and realised I was swapping cars. So I swapped out of the CRV and into a CRZ. and drove back from St Albans and they're in a lot of room even when you fold the seats down for a pair of front seats from this tucked into the back of it. So I had the front passenger seat was all the way forward, and these kind of two seats kind of 69ing in the back of the car. So, and anyone joining as I'm saying the last part of that sentence is probably like, hang on a minute, this is not the kind of podcast that I thought it was going to be. But yeah.
Now I am a big Honda fan, having had a few Hondas and had a money pit Honda Integra DC2 many years ago. And there's one car that I would love to do an EV conversion, a really Larry one, HRV, like one of the original ones.
Yes, they were cool.
Super
were cool. What happened to the HRV?
Cheeky 3-door, slammed 3-door.
It's a Polo bread van on stilts. And it was so cool. It's so cool.
I saw one a while back, and I remember thinking, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I think
the spoiler on the roof as well.
Yeah. I've always been a bit of a Honda nut. I mean, the FRV, no. I mean, I remember having one as a company car, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to crash into the side of that. Because they're so blooming wide, weird." But yeah, that. I wonder if I'm sure people have done some crazy turbo conversions on HRVs, but I mean, we've gone into modified and conversion stuff after classics, but I think, I mean, yeah,
kind of follows suit.
So what?
It kind of follows suit, though, doesn't it? I mean, I think this is the other side of it: is as people start to realise what you can do potentially to some of these vehicles, that's going to be sort of part of giving them an enthusiast following, isn't it? It's not necessarily what people think about them now, but what people realise you can do with them down the line. You know, when you start getting more parts available for them, where you start getting people to take notice of what you might be able to tweak and to modify. And as I've mentioned on this before, I mean, interviewing Bisimoto years ago. So Bisimoto is a Honda tuner in California, moved into Porsche tuning, and now does a lot of stuff with EV conversions as well. He's saying I remember him saying to me, he's like, this is a tuning revolution. He said, it's all software. You can set these cars up to deliver the power however you want. You can introduce faux gear changes if you like. You can have the regen come in however you want it. You can have it delivering the torque however you want it. He said it's a blank canvas, and you can push the power as far as you want as long as you've got enough cooling, and you haven't got to worry about emissions tests and all the rest of it. It's like, I know it's expensive, but I don't get why people aren't really excited about this. And that's I think going to be the interesting thing as more enthusiasts get hold of them, is kind of going, actually, and this I guess goes back a few stages in this conversation about, it does then start to fall into the rest of that thing where the rest of that kind of familiarity of the enthusiasts and it falling into the wider car scene in the ways that yesterday's modern classics. So the stuff like this that was newish 20 years ago, and I was taking it to car shows, and actually I've got a good anecdote about that as well. But yeah, it's as you get a community building behind it, and as it starts to not feel like a new car, that's when it starts to become interesting. That's where it becomes more affordable. That's where people start exploring what you can do with it as well. Now, going back to this real world example. So this would have been about 15 years ago. I keep quite a broad friendship group, and I've always been used to the tribalism within the car community and sort of people having differing opinions on things. Now, first weekend of September, I think this would have been 2009, maybe 2010. There are three car shows going on at once. One of them is Tracks at Silverstone, which is a multi-mark modified car show. One of them is Edition 38, which is just down the road. It would have been not Billing, Overstone Park, I think it was at that point.
Yeah,
it's a modern Volkswagen show. And the other is VW Action, which I think at that point was at Santa Pod, and I think it still is Pod. So VW Action is predominantly air-cooled stuff. There is some modern water-cooled stuff in it. But group of my friends near where I was living, guys I've known for years, we're all going to that. And I said, well, I'm going to do one day at VW Action. I'm going to do one day at Edition 38. And then my mate goes, what do you want to go to Edition 38 for? He goes, it's full of chavs. I was like,
so right.
Right? Anyway,
so right.
So I went to Edition 38, and I was chatting to a few of the guys there that I knew through the kind of the more modern scene. And a few of them had come from Tracks and gone to Edition 38 on a Sunday. And one of the guys, not a word of a lie, goes, "Why'd you go to tracks? It's full of chavs." And I'm like, guys, we're all into basically the same thing, right? If you're slamming your Beetle on big, MP5s and all the rest of it, you're modifying your car, right? If you've got a modernish Golf, if you've got like a Mark III or a Mark IV Golf, and you're putting it on air ride and rotiforms and all the rest of it, you've got a modified car. If you've got a Corsa with a big sound, we're all into the same thing, broadly speaking, right? We've got to stop calling one another chavs. We're all basically into the same hobby. And this is where I think the mindset change we were talking about earlier with EVs and becoming that kind of familiar part of the scene is, as things go more automated and more shared and all the rest of it, there is a community of, regardless of powertrain, car owners, car people that will still exist, and there'll be more, I think, commonality in terms of, it doesn't really matter what's under the bonnet. It's the fact that it's a personal car and it's your car and you own it and it's yours and you're looking after it and you've got an affection for it, whether that's because your parents had a Model 3 or because you like the sound of the last few remaining like V8 engines that you can buy in 2024. And I think it'll matter less and less what's under the bonnet, but what you bring to it, and when you own it and stuff. So it felt to me with this, I say 200,000 impressions and all the thousands of people who got in touch with me on LinkedIn over this, I just thought it doesn't matter what you think about EVs today. It's about what tomorrow's car enthusiasts think about those cars tomorrow and how they fit into tomorrow's motoring world and what they look like. And I think they'll look as antiquated and as novel as yesterday's classics do today. It's inevitable. And so, yeah, will there be a classic scene for EVs? Of course there will. Of course there will. And it'll be as small a percentage of the mainstream stuff as your Escorts and stuff are today, and your Beetles, your surviving Beetles are a tiny, like fractions of a percentage of the overall production run. And it doesn't matter. People love those cars. And it's not because they sound amazing, and it's not because they're rare. It's not because they're expensive. They'll never cross the auction block at Barrett Jackson for £1 million. It's just because there's something about them that they click with. Maybe a friend or a relative. Their parents had them. Maybe they saw them in films. There's just something about them. And I don't see there's any question that will happen with EVs given time.
And I think here endeth the lesson. So, say again, what'd you say? I missed that.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we summed it up. Well, you summed it up nicely, Alex, to be fair. And I think this was great to talk about it. And I think, I think we put some good points out there. And I think we were nice and evenly spread, apart from the fact that I said that I didn't like diesels or Vauxhalls. But other than that, I think it was a fairly even spread. But thank you, everybody, for partaking for this live. I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll be back next week. I think we're going to be talking about EV conversions or something similar to that, or potentially actually the government. Thanks, guys. Thanks for it's only a great show when you guys are asked, putting the comments in as well. So thanks, everyone. So yeah, we might be talking about what's happening with the government tax and what all the rest of it, or it might be EV conversion, or it might be a bit of everything. But thanks everyone for listening in, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Cheers, guys.
See you in a bit.